This episode is brought to you by Trident Coffee, the veteran-owned brand where every sip inspires you to live life full steam ahead. At Trident, they are more than just coffee. They are storytellers. It's crafted by veterans. Their instant cold brew is perfect for those who serve, those who have served, and anyone who values wellness. Featuring natural ingredients like organic mushrooms, adaptogens, and nootropics, it's more than just a morning pick-me-up. It's your new wellness ritual. Enjoy it at home or on the go, wherever your day takes you. Trident Coffee isn't just about great tasting coffee. It's about empowering you to be the healthiest version of yourself because great veterans make great citizens. Try their instant cold brew coffee today and taste the freedom of wellness. Remember, when you choose Trident, you're not just choosing coffee. You're choosing a path of connection through health and wellness. Use promo code DTD15 for 15% off your order. Hey guys, welcome back to the Dynamic Tales Delivered podcast. This week in the studio, the man behind the explosive memoir, Guns, Girls, and Greed. I was a Blackwater mercenary in Iraq. His journey started in 1999 when he joined the Air Force, but it didn't take long for him to find himself right in the middle of the action. He was part of the ground offensive in Iraq in 2003, witnessing history unfold firsthand. But that's not all. From 2004 to 2005, he was a private military contractor for none other than Blackwater, the most notorious contractor in Iraq. And if you think his story ends there, think again. He went on to become an Army intelligence officer, serving in Iraq once more from 2009 to 2010. And if his adventures on the battlefield weren't enough, he sharpened his intellect by attending the prestigious Tufts University Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy, where he earned a Master's of International Business degree in International Banking and Finance. So buckle up and get ready for a wild ride as we uncover the incredible experiences of a man who has seen it all and lived to tell the tale. Please welcome Morgan Lerette. What's going on, my friend?
Not too much. After hearing that, I want to meet this guy.
He's pretty fucking cool, I will tell you that. So, man, I'm so glad you're here. We've been talking about this for a while, and I'm so happy that we get to do this because there's so much to talk about. This book was absolutely fantastic. Funny, poignant. You really bear it all. There's parts of it where I feel like you want people to think you're the biggest asshole on the planet. And then you turn the page or go to the next chapter and you're a completely different person, and then back to the biggest asshole on the planet. So I want to talk about all of these things and how your life coming up to that has affected you. Of course, we always start out with talking about childhood. And I want to read a quote from the book just to get people kind of on level with what we're talking about in your childhood. We're talking about your absentee father. And you say, "This guy's trash. After leaving my mom and 3 kids to pursue the fine art of drinking and drug abuse, he could use a little slam, slap, and tickle." Now, you pull no punches about your father in this whole thing. You talk about a story that we can talk about here when you were 16 and took a girlfriend over to his house. Let's kind of set the stage of your life from there and show kind of later on in this conversation how that really affected you.
Yeah, I mean, dude, look, my dad's a scumbag. That's just all there is to it. But he's dead now, so that's nice. But the dude was just one of those guys that, like, as soon as he had the first kid, and then I came 14 months later, and then my sister came along like 5 years later. But he didn't want to have anything to do with kids. He just wanted to be the person that he was, and the person that he was just an absolute scumbag. So he would like pop in and out of our lives. So he would go to Alabama. Usually, I found out later, he's running from the law. He goes to Alabama, and then he'd come back to Arizona where we were living, and we'd get to see him like 1 week in a month, 2 weeks a year. Well, kind of like the National Guard, right? And then like he would just blow out of town. He'd be like, "Hey, I'm going to come by. I got to go back to Alabama. I got really important stuff to do." And then he would like not say goodbye. We'd be sitting there waiting for him to come and say goodbye. And like, dude, it just like it ripped my guts out as a kid. And it had the same effect for all of my siblings to a certain extent. But you always want to think your dad is like, I don't like not your hero, but like is a decent person inside. And, I just figured out right around 16, between 16 and like 21 or so, that the guy was a scumbag and had to go no communication with him because he was not redeemable.
Well, here's the thing though. When you talk about that and you talk about him and the relationship that you had with him, I want to talk about that 16-year-old where you kind of, it finally clicks into your head. Hey, this guy, according to your words, is kind of a piece of shit. He's trash. You take a girlfriend over to his house because you want to kind of involve him in your life. And you're talking to him about the difference between Billy Joel and Elton John. And it leads to a huge fight. So can you set the stage for us and talk about it? Because I think that there was some parts of this fight that you had with him that came out later on in the book with other fights that you had with contractors and different people.
Yeah, so well, I go to his house and I'm with my girlfriend, and I was driving like a red Beetle at the time, which is kind of gross. I regret that car now. But we get to the house and like he opens up the door and he's like not really smiling. You could tell something's going on. But he kind of cracks a small smile and he's missing his front tooth. Well, it turned out that he was driving his car earlier in the week, and it was like 4 a.m. or 5 a.m. in the morning. He was going to work, got into a car accident, rear-ended somebody, ended up getting a DUI that early because he was, the guy just never stopped drinking. But it knocked his front tooth out. So we all pretend it's normal, like this is just a normal day with my dad. We're sitting down on his couch, and he's like chain smoking Marlboro Reds, and he puts on the radio, and it's Billy Joel. And Billy Joel is just jamming out. Well, now look, dude, I don't know the first thing about Billy Joel except that he plays the piano, and I get him mixed up with Elton John. So I look over at him and I'm like, "Hey, Dad, like Billy Joel came out as gay," and he's like, "No, Billy Joel was not gay." I was like, "Yeah, no, like he's gay. He came out as gay. Who cares? He's gay. What does it matter?" My dad's like, "Don't you dare talk about Billy Joel like that." Like I was insulting his child. Not that I was his child, but insulting somebody else. And then I was like, "Dude, who cares? What does it matter? The guy's gay." And the guy socks me in the mouth. Just like sucker punches me, right hook, right to the chops. Like, I mean, thank God he's only like 145 pounds soaking wet. It didn't really hurt. It kind of busted my lip a little bit. I taste blood. And then I looked at him and said, "Hey, why don't you just take that cigarette and stick it in that hole where your tooth used to be, and you can just hold it like that and smoke it." That's when he like exploded and was like, "I'll beat your ass." I heard all kinds of cool stuff from him, like, um, "The best part of you ran down your mom's leg when you were born, and you came from my balls." Like, that's what it came down to. Is like I had really insulted his manhood at this point. So me and my girlfriend ended up leaving, and she's like, "My God, how'd you turn out okay?" And I was like, "Well, I didn't think I did, but in comparison, I'm all right." So the guy wasn't around that much. I don't want to give like this idea that he was always around, because he wasn't. And I had my other white trash childhood, which I really enjoyed. But when you're a kid, you just assume that everybody's the same way as you, right? Like you're standing in line for government cheese with a bunch of other families, and that's who you see every day at school. You're like, "Oh, this is a normal childhood." And it's not till later that you look back and say, maybe dads don't tell their kids that they came from their balls. I don't know.
I mean, you're a father. I'm pretty sure you've never said it. And, I think we can really mark that down as, yeah, that's probably true. They don't say those kind of things. The thing that I want to ask you about your childhood, though, you said you look around and it seems all the same to you, that everyone grows up that way, that it doesn't really click until later in life. But I have to ask, there has to be a point even as a child where you're looking around and not quite seeing the same thing. You've got to either like spend the night with a friend or join the Boy Scouts or something like that, where you see that that's not a normal thing at an earlier age. Because can we get into kind of your mom too? Was she there? I know grandma and grandpa, and we'll get into them, but I want to focus on the main familial parties.
Well, the kids that I hung out with were all the same, right? Like single mom, had a stepdad, something along those lines, right? Like lower middle, like, well, I wouldn't even say middle class, like lower class, working class stiffs. Dads went off to go work construction. Moms would have a job at like Safeway or something along those lines, or a waitress. So, I mean, for the most part, those were the kids that I was around. And then you went to the kid's house that had some money, and you walk in their place and be like, "How come there's not stuff all over the floor?" How come there's not like stains all over the sink? Those were the weird guys, right? Those were the weird ones. But yeah, at some point you realize that there's the haves and the have-nots. When somebody, like in high school, people are wearing Ralph Lauren, and I'm wearing a T-shirt like I do right now, and you're like, man, like these guys have money. And even looking back at that, a lot of those guys didn't even have like money. But to me, like they were the rich kids, right? They were the ones that had a car when they turned 16, and the car was within 3 to 4 years of being new, as opposed to my like 1985 GMC Caballero that I was rocking. So you do see it, but like, I mean, even all the kids on the wrestling team were kind of the same way, right? Like I wrestled in high school, so my best friend, he came from the same kind of ilk. Like almost all those guys were just, we grew up in trailers and stuff.
Well, I've got to ask though, when you find about the haves and the have-nots, and you find out that there is money in the world, and maybe it's from these guys, maybe it's later on in life. Do you think that's what was so intoxicating about contracting to you? Was the money was just stupid money coming in?
Oh hell yeah! Anybody that says they wouldn't work for Blackwater out of the largesse and the kindness of their heart is a filthy liar. Like at the end of the day, $550 a day in 2004 was a hell of a lot of money. You're looking at $200,000 a year approximately. So that was really the draw to contracting. Yeah, you can go, you can get your adventure, and you're not associated with the military. Those are all positives. But if they weren't throwing a $500 bill at me every day, there's absolutely no way I would have went over there.
Yeah, it's a ton of money. And you mention it on numerous occasions throughout the book, not only in good ways where you're being able to buy everything that you want, but relationships that you're in where money is being flushed pretty much down the toilet. You don't say it in quite a nice a manner in there. But I wonder, when you look around now and you look back on grandma, grandpa, the family members that you talk to, do you think they knew that when you went over there to be a contractor? And the reason I'm asking that question is because as you kind of move through your contractor career, you start seeing less and less of family. You start talking to family less and less. Do you think they kind of figured out and weren't really worried about your safety because they kind of knew the MO behind what you were doing?
No, they had no idea, which was kind of the good part in the whole thing, right? Like nobody knew who Blackwater was until March 2004 when the Blackwater guys got ambushed and killed in Fallujah. So nobody had any idea what we were doing. And honestly, it's a heck of a lot dangerous than being in the military because you can't pick up the radio and say, hey, something bad happened. Can you send out a bunch of reinforcements, a QRF or whatnot? Like we had long range missions where once you got out of Baghdad or once you got away from like our command post, wherever that was, you just had no radio comms. So it was just you and like 12, 13 guys in these vehicles, and it was all you. My family, and I think what happens with a lot of families is you end up going overseas. They know it's dangerous. They worry about it for a while, and then like they have their own lives, and that's frustrating, right? That's frustrating for soldiers. It's frustrating for contractors because these guys are worried about the price of milk, and I'm worried about, oh my God, is this rocket going to come blow me up? And then I get sent home in little bits and pieces that look like hamburger meat. And they're sitting there like every conversation I have with them is something that feels so mundane. Um, and that kind of separates you when you're overseas from your family. I call it a wormhole. You go in, and then 1 year later, you come out of this wormhole. You think you're the same person, and then you come back and everything has changed, but everything's exactly the same somehow, right? Your family's all the same. Milk prices haven't changed that much, but you don't relate to the people that you did in the same manner. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating for soldiers. It's exceptionally difficult for contractors because you don't come home and you get to bitch with your other soldiers. You come home and it's just you. It's you and the thoughts in your head.
Okay, so let's put a pin in that one because I want to come back to that because you point out that in the middle of the book a lot. Let's talk a little more about when you join, okay, and you go into the Air Force, and I'm thinking you're kind of Air Guard that you do it. What's so interesting about your whole career and throughout this whole book is I really think you hate the military. You get that feeling from it, and I'm not saying that that's right, but you get this feeling that you hate the military. You hate not necessarily what it stands for, but the bureaucracy that's built into it, the dumb things that are checked on when other things that are way more important are overlooked. But yet you continue to live that military life, the Air Force, then contracting, then into the Army. You got to kind of explain to me as you go in the Air Force what you're looking for in the beginning when you go there, and where do you become disillusioned before you become a contractor?
Man, anybody that spent time in the military understands the hurry up and wait, right? Like you got to get somewhere as fast as you possibly can, and then you get there and nothing is happening. And it gets very bureaucratic, it gets very political. And I always looked at the military kind of like, I mean, the story is that my grandfather told me if I was going to join the military to join the Air Force because they had the best food, right? I didn't have this grand plan. I like at the end of the day, I joined up. I was going to go for college money. Maybe they gave me some training. It was going to be great. And then when you get in, you realize that it, at least for me, it did not meet the standard that I thought it was going to be. You watch all these commercials and these people are flying planes or they're out there like killing the enemy. And then you get into basic training and tech school and it's not that hard. Like it just wasn't that difficult for me. So it never met the expectations that I had. And then you start piling on just like the stupidity of it. I'll illustrate it with a story. So after September 11th, we had this big fence line. It was a chain link fence. And the government gave us these sensors so that we could put on the fence. And if anybody jumped on the fence, the sensor would go off, the camera would move towards it. You'd be able to see if somebody was trying to come on your base. Well, these were never going off because people weren't jumping the fence. So they said, okay, every 24 hours, let's go out there and let's hit those sensors to make sure they're still working. So you literally drive around and then you hit a sensor and you say, does that work? Yeah, it works. You go to the next sensor and you just keep doing this. Well, then somebody says, you know, we should probably do this once every shift. So now we're doing it every 8 hours. We're hitting them 3 times a day. And then people say, you know, we should probably do it every 2 hours. So now you're hitting these things 12 times a day and the sensors break. Like, go figure, the sensors are going to break if you're out there hitting them with an M16 all the time. That's the military. Like, if it's not broke, they will fix it until it is. And it's absolutely frustrating if you go in there and you have any kind of individuality or you can look at things and say, why are we doing it such an inefficient way when we could just do it this way? And I think that that's why I've been successful out of the military, is because I can look at stuff and say, that's not efficient, let's fix it. And people will actually go, oh, hey, you're right. If there's a way to fix it, let's get it done.
Okay, so let me ask you then, would you agree that all of those things in the military that you talk about where they'll fix it, until it's broken or until they can get it to turn another way, you don't have that in contracting, and you mentioned that in the book. But I want to ask you honestly, do you think without having that kind of constant overwatch on everything like the military has, that you run into a lot of pitfalls with that and there's not a lot of oversight, which can lead to some very, very bad things?
Absolutely. So the military does everything to the lowest common denominator, right? The stupidest person in the unit is going to be the one that everybody makes rules around. And then everybody suffers because that guy's an idiot. With contracting, you don't have that. But what you did have is egos. So what happens is as a contractor, like me, I was one of the more vocal people saying we should do it this way. Let's make this easier, more efficient. And then somebody would say, well, when I was in the Navy SEALs, we did it this way. In the Rangers, we did it this way. And those egos kind of combine, or they kind of fight each other. To the point that it's just as frustrating. But at least with contracting, you can say, I don't want this guy on my team, and you can send him to a different team and he'll probably fit in better at a different team. Every team is so different. But there are pitfalls in the lack of oversight because you don't have the same laws governing you, the same rules and regulations, right? At every unit, probably as a police officer, it's the same way. You got rules, you got regulations. This is how you do stuff. This is when you do stuff. When you take those away, try to push the limits. And I think in the book, I say like, contractors are like lethal 16-year-olds. Like, that's the mentality. 16 to 20-year-old young men, doesn't matter their age, they're going to push the limits, and they will always push the limits. And it's really up to the reader to decide, is that good or bad?
Well, And I don't know if it's whether it's a good or a bad. I think that there's a very much indifference that can be in there because you mention over and over you as the reader know who Blackwater is. You know all the things that have happened to Blackwater. You'll make your own conclusion, and you even say at the end of the book, I can't change your mind on what you think about contractors. So when I look at that, though, I looked at a big part of the book when you talk about that you don't have to report every shoot that happens. And you talk about a lot of shoots that aren't reported. What I want to ask you about that is that when you're not reporting those shoots, yes, you don't go through the bureaucracy. Yes, you're going to be cleared from them and all those kind of things. But I almost wonder if that's how you get into trouble, because I think after a while, people start to skirt everything they can because they know I don't have to report this. I don't have to do this. So as long as I don't screw up in a major way to get caught, I can pretty much get away with anything I want.
Oh, 100%. The first shoot I talk about in the book, the guy opens the door, yells something really cool, shoots his weapon, and you're like, holy cow, like this is legitimate. And then he goes and he does a report, nothing comes out of it. It goes into the big filing bin that nobody ever reads, which is probably a trash can. And then after a while, you say, is that something that's worth my time or not worth my time? And honestly, nobody sat us down and said, when this happens, you do this. When this happens, you do that. It was the Wild West. It was a bunch of guys coming together to do a difficult mission. We did it well, but you have to make split-second decisions, right? If that car is coming at you, is that a car bomb or is it just a guy that sucks at driving? So you engage the car. You're not trying to kill people. You're not trying to like go and shoot somebody. Like we all still have a moral conscience. But I had no qualms shooting out a tire, shooting out the radiator of a car all day, because when it's you making that decision and you don't have that UCMJ or whatever it is over your shoulder telling you you can't do that, you just make the decision and you go with it, and then you sleep good at night.
So how did the people that were above you, how did they take that? Because I know that there was a lot of conflict. We'll talk about like Sergeant Major, or we'll talk about a couple other people that you worked with and worked, I guess you would say, quote unquote, worked for, where they just did not understand that. Yet they were contractors. So how does that bog down what you guys are trying to do when that's happening?
Yeah, so everybody brings their past into Blackwater, right? Whether you're a special operations guy, whether you're Air Force security forces like me, a lot of those people had been in the military between 10 and 25 years. And the only thing they knew was the military. They knew how to prepare like the military. They knew how you do your checks with the military. All those things that like were the reason I didn't like the military, they wanted to put into the Blackwater processes. But when you got a bunch of guys that, nobody outranks anybody else, at some point it breaks and people say, I'm not going to do that. You're wasting my time. I got plenty of time right now, and you want to spend the next 3 to 4 hours talking about an after action report. I'd much rather go to the pool and drink beer. So there was always, it probably goes back to ego, there was always a conflict between what people would think you needed to do versus what you had to do. And the truth is, nobody knew what we had to do. Nobody knew what rules, regulations, restrictions were on us at any given time. So I can't even tell you today that when they said, if you go out there and you discharge your firearm outside of the green zone, you have to report it. I don't remember ever being told that, which is crazy.
So who do you blame that on? The head of Blackwater, or do you blame it on the State Department?
That's the State Department. The State Department at the end of the day signed a contract with Blackwater, that signed a contract with me and a bunch of other guys. And somewhere in that chain, the State Department decided it was cheaper, it was easier, and it was more advantageous to have contractors. And they said, hey, Blackwater, now it's on you. And Blackwater said, okay, nah, now guys on the ground, it's on you. So there was nothing that ever moved down or up that chain of command, at least when I was there. I'm sure it's different now. But there was nothing where somebody said, when this happens, you do this. These are the laws that govern you. These are your rules of engagement. It was just, hey, show up. There's your gun. There's your Suburban. Get this guy from point A to point B. Let's roll.
And so ego rules the day then.
Yeah, it rules the day until somebody like me opens up their fat mouth and says, "Hey, this is stupid. I'm tired of this crap." And then everybody, has a mini mutiny, and we kick somebody off the team, or we get a new team leader. Like it's just dog eat dog world. It's very weird, like looking back at it.
So let's go back as you join, okay? I want you to describe your personality, your mind state as you go into the Air Force and you do your combat tour in the Air Force. How are you as a person? Because I think you changed extremely. I don't even know how to say it. Like you became a different person when you contracted. And when I say a different person, you even talk about the three stages that you go through. So describe to me how you are in the Air Force and doing your first combat rotation.
When I joined the Air Force, I was that guy. Oh my God, I was the guy that people didn't like. I was the guy that polished my
No.
boots every day. I had my sleeves all ironed out. Like I was shit hot in the Air Force. And then we got activated after September 11th, and I kept doing that. But I started hanging out with these guys that were former Force Recon Marines. They joined the Air National Guard, same reason I did. College money, like, hey, you get a paycheck 1 week in a month, easy day. And you slowly start becoming who you hang out with. And that's just in general, right? Like, I went to a snooty college. If I go and hang out with those snooty college guys, I can pontificate about the cost of bananas and the socioeconomic impact on Venezuela with those guys. If I'm hanging out with the guys from my small town, I can talk about, going out and shooting beer cans and making, small bombs when we were in high school. So I slowly started just becoming similar to the individuals that I was hanging out with. And when I got to Blackwater, you start hanging out with like the baddest dudes on the planet. And you can kind of see it in the book. I don't know how pronounced it is, but when I get there, it's like I just don't know what I'm doing. I want to learn everything. I want to be the person that doesn't come in and has this big fat ego. And then once I get to a point that I'm comfortable and I'm almost like the Blackwater veteran on ground, that's when I start turning into like an asshole. And I think it's just a natural, I would say it's a natural progression, but it's just kind of how it happens. Some people are more than happy to sit there, play cards, and then take crap from everybody. That wasn't why I was there.
Here's where the dichotomy happens, though, to me. You say you wanted to be the guy that was just quiet when you got there and kind of, soak everything up. But I can even remember you describing getting your first rifle out of the box. That character is already starting to change when you get that rifle in your hands. And I think it's from almost like point A when you get there because the way you described where you guys lived, what you guys did every day, it was Caligula's castle. I'm telling you, it was his palace is how it seemed. Would you disagree with that?
No, I agree. As soon as we got on ground, we were treated like, I wouldn't say like we were royalty, but we were almost untouchable. Is how it was. The military guys, had a love-hate relationship with them. They'd be like, oh, those Blackwater guys, they can do whatever they want. They're drinking at the pool, like leave them be. And then a lot of the junior enlisted would be like, oh, those guys are the coolest guys ever. They're out there doing direct operations, which we weren't. So you just get treated distinctly and separate, and people just let you do whatever the heck you want, which is crazy coming from the military. And I drink that up like it was a fine wine.
Well, let's go a step further. Not only are you treated like royalty, you're 24 years old being treated like royalty. That has to fucking do something to you.
Oh yeah, no, I mean it's not like I was the apex of maturity at 24 years old either. And when you get there and people are like, you get to grow your beard and you get to walk around with your weapon with ammunition in it and like have it holstered, like you're just treated like rules don't apply. And at 24, that's intoxicating. It's absolutely intoxicating.
Don't you think it's intoxicating at 35 and 40 to be treated like that?
Yeah, but I think there's a little bit more maturity that comes with it because a lot of the guys that I worked with, like when I got there, I volunteered for everything. I wanted to be the guy that was always going out into the red zone. Yeah, I was making great money, but the adventure was also intoxicating. a lot of the guys were a little bit older, and they were more than happy just to sit on the base all day, every day if they had to, because they looked at it like, I'm here and I'm making money and I'm going to do what I want. And at the end of the day, I'm doing this for maybe a reason. I didn't have a goal. I didn't have anything. I was just kind of like seat of my pants going through the process, and the money was something that I was able to absorb. And when you start making that kind of money at 24, you also get like big headed and arrogant. So even when I got home, it was like, oh, I'll get lunch, or oh, I'll get dinner, or hey, that guy can't talk to me like that. I make more money, and it just, I mean, looking back on it, it's absolutely insane. But at the time, it felt like I had earned that prestige somehow instead of just falling ass first into it like I had.
Or I'll buy some throwing knives to hook to my gear for when I get into a fight. Like when I heard that in the book, I was like, what the fuck is he even thinking about? Like, I can't even imagine, like, when I think about the ego on you, like, to think that. I mean, let's break that down right here. To think that you're going to be so in it that you're using throwing knives to get out of it.
Yeah, no, I
I
mean, I was prepared to go into the shit. Okay, so I'll give you the full story. My
okay.
buddy got to Blackwater before I did, and you know those shops at the mall where the guy was going to join the military but he didn't. So now he owns a sword shop and it's got all the cool combat shit in it. My buddy goes down there and just buys the place out. Like he gets every cool thing that you possibly can. And before he goes to Blackwater, he's like, "Man, I got these throwing knives. I got like this K bar, I got like this watch, I got," and I thought, well, like that's what you do when you're getting ready to go do a cool guy thing. You go and you buy this crap. And I can look at it and be like, oh my God, this is ridiculous. Like it's absolutely ridiculous. I'm never gonna be at the point where I'm gonna have to like go hot with throwing knives that I have attached to my belt. And I try to keep it pretty light. Like at the end of the day, I know how stupid it is, but like
But
I
do
needed to
you?
assimilate. Oh yeah, no, I absolutely knew how
You
dumb it
think
was.
even back then you do?
Once I got on ground and I was like looking, I was unpacking and I looked at these stupid throwing knives that I was supposed to put on my belt. I was like, dude, I'm not wearing those things. This is ridiculous.
Did you just hide them?
Yeah, well, I would tell people because I'm self-deprecating, so I'd be like, "Yeah, I got some sweet throwing knives. You want to go practice, throwing them at the Hodge or something?" But yeah, it absolutely ridiculous. But I also do talk about like, since I'm going to be making all this money and I got these throwing knives, I may as well go get a Cinnabon because goddamn, those things are delicious.
Yeah, they are. All right. As you get over there as a contractor, I want to talk about kind of what you're looking for when you get there, because you said that you didn't have a plan, you didn't have focus, you didn't really have an end goal in mind. So when you do that and you go over there, there has to be something that you're planning on, because whether that even be that you're planning, hey, I'm going to die, I'm not going to make it out of this 1 year contract, that's going to be the end game for me. There has to be something that you're looking for when you go over there. Were you looking to find yourself? I know you say adventure, but I think it's a deeper answer than that. Were you looking for something in yourself? Were you looking to prove something to yourself? Were you looking to die over there? What was it that you were trying to do?
I mean, I so when I went in during the ground offensive with the Air Force, you get in there and you think you're going to be in this shit and nothing happens, and it's kind of disappointing, right? Like I had spent how many years prior to that training to go into combat, and then you get into a combat situation and nothing really happens. So when I went to Blackwater, that's absolutely what I wanted to do. I wanted to prove to myself, hey, I can actually go and I can hang with these dudes that are way better trained, that are way cooler than I am. And once I proved that out, I wish I could say I had a plan. And this is what I tell anybody that's going to contract. Set a plan before you go, whether it's paying off your house, paying off college, whether it's going and getting a new car. Because when you don't have a plan, you do stuff like I do. You come home with a bunch of money, you buy a Land Rover, you spend every penny you have, and then you have to go back to contracting. So my entire plan was go do contracting for however long it is. And I couldn't tell you if in my head it was for 2 years or if it was for 5 years. But at some point, I was going to be financially well off enough to where I could go home and actually have like a real life, have the wife and the kids, or whatever it turned out to be.
Well, what was it though? That's what I'm wondering. Like, what, you say the wife and the kids and stuff. What did you think you were going to do?
Okay, I have to level with you. I was not smart enough to actually know what I was going to do. I wish I look. It sounds stupid now that I say it out loud, but I was really just thinking I'm going to make so much money over here that I'm going to have this big nice house, and you know maybe I can retire. Maybe I can. Who knows? Like, come on. I
I
wish
get it.
I wish I would have had a plan. I didn't.
But does anyone in your life, grandma, grandpa, your aunt, anybody sit you down and go, look, okay, this is what you're doing, or is everyone just as oblivious as you are to it?
No, nobody sat me down. Absolutely nobody, because at the end of the day, you know, my uncle was very successful, and when I came home and I got a Land Rover and all that other stuff, he was talking to somebody and said, "Yeah, the money is really getting to Morgan's head," which it was, and I would have fought him over that at the time, but it absolutely was. But it's not like I grew up around people that planned their retirement, that did 401ks, that like knew what they were going to do for how long, and then once that was done, what's their second career going to be. So nobody sat me down. Everybody was just like, oh, Morgan's going to do his thing, and then when he comes home, he's going to do his other thing.
But you had a bachelor's in business, correct?
No, my bachelor's degree was in criminal justice, because that was the fastest way to get out of college, my undergrad. So I did not, but I didn't have it at the time, right? I got that after I got done with Blackwater. I finished up my bachelor's degree.
Right, but you had gone through, correct? I mean, you were at least 3 years in, weren't you?
My head I was, but a lot of that stuff is the community college of the Air Force, where it's like I've got 120 credit hours, and you're like four of those actually transfer to something.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, like I nobody went to college. Like I'm the first one to go to college in my family. You just, you know, it really is the whole paradigm that I grew up in is you work construction until those houses are built. And then once those houses are built, you hope that somebody else is building a house and you can go help build that house and the next house. Like there's no job security. There's no having a plan. It's just you're going to work construction, and when there's work, you work, and when there's not, there's not. And you know, they probably looked at it the same way I did. Look, there's work. Morgan's over there making money. Good for him.
Okay. That's fair. All right. I want to put you in a mind state, okay? When you go over there and you step at this embassy or where you're staying in these palaces, I want you to think back sights, sounds, smells when you first go there and you look around and you're like, holy shit. Because you're, like you said, treated like royalty and everything. So walk me through what you're feeling as you come onto these compounds.
My idea of a nice hotel is like Motel 6 at this point.
Okay.
So when I get to Jordan, where Blackwater is staying, that's like a 4.5 or 5 star hotel. When I walked into that lobby and I saw all the marble and the granite and all that other stuff, I thought, holy crap. Like, I'm hanging out with those kids that wore Ralph Lauren in high school. Like, man, but this is insane. Now, when you go to Baghdad, the first thing that happens is, holy shit, what I get myself into. And then after that, walking into the embassy, I can't explain. Maybe it's like this. Maybe this is what Mar-a-Lago looks like. But you walk into Saddam Hussein's palace, and everything is like hand carved and painted wood and crystal chandeliers, and it's probably 40,000 square feet between its 2.5 stories. And I was just in awe that, one, I was there working for Blackwater and making money, and two, like, that anybody would have that kind of money in this entire world, and three, that I was actually a part of it. Like I was just the guy that could bebop around and go wherever he wanted in this thing. I mean, it was shocking, to be completely honest with you. Like looking at myself in the mirror and be like, how the hell did I get myself in this situation? Not in a good way or a bad way, but like it's just so different than how my entire life had been up to that point.
Would you say it's overwhelming?
I mean, it's definitely overwhelming. You're walking around and coming from the military, you have the lieutenant colonels, generals, everybody's walking around. And I'm walking around like I don't give a fuck, which is
No, no,
crazy,
no, no.
right?
Let me clarify. You weren't walking around like you didn't give a fuck. You did not give a fuck. And there were numerous officers and high-ranking officials that you let know by calling them, not by their rank.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I was like the guy that would put his thumb in your eye. How was that guy? Because it was almost like a way of paying back the stupidity of the military that I had gone through. It's like a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. You're getting pretty high up the food chain, and now I can walk up to that guy and be like, "Dude, you're an idiot. I don't care. I'm gonna walk past you. I'm gonna do whatever I want." Like it was, I definitely took advantage of not having the rank structure.
The reason I point that out is we'll get into it a little later when you go back into the Army. Do you remember how it smelled? Because there are some points in this book where you are very, very specific about how things look and how they smell.
Dude, everything in Iraq smells like dirt, like talcum powder dirt. And it's it I mean everything is coated in like just the finest talcum powder that you've ever been around. So if you've ever taken baby powder and put it on your own butthole, your balls or something, I don't know. Let's not make this weird, but sometimes Gold Bond feels really good and it tingles down there. That's
Or if you
that's
have hemorrhoids and don't have an air conditioner.
Yeah, exactly.
You have a buddy about that.
So like everything smells bland. Like it if you go into the chow hall, it smells like whatever slop they're cooking. But everything else just smells like dirt to the point that you don't notice it after a while. When you get there, you notice it. Almost like you can notice when it's rained. And then after a while, you just realize like, oh, it rained. You can feel the humidity. It's the same thing with the dirt over there. Like everything is just covered in it. It smells like it. And when you get your clothes washed, it's not like they use Downy, you know, Spring Breeze. Like they literally just throw it in there with some soap that probably has no smell, or you hope they're even using soap. Like your clothes don't smell, nothing smells. It's just dirt.
Are you trying to learn the culture when you get there? And the reason I ask this is because I kind of feel like you were not really ready for the world as a whole when you got over there. And I'm talking about your friend that was an Asian friend and what you thought, to call people and things like that. Do you think you were trying to learn the culture in general or the culture of the world, or do you think that was just a little ahead of you at the time?
I was inquisitive about it, but I don't know that I cared to actually learn.
Okay.
Under the auspices that if I learned it, that I would adhere to it, because I was never going to adhere to the culture. That's just not who I am. So the story you're talking about, this little Asian guy, I called him Oriental, right? Because when I was growing up, that's what you said. Oh, this person's Oriental, or whatever. So I was like, hey, what are you? And he's like, I'm Dave. And I was like, yeah, but you're Oriental. And he's like, what do you mean I'm Oriental? Like, am I rug? Am I a soup? What is Oriental? And I was like, what do you want to be called, dude? And he's like, I'm Asian. I'm Korean. And he was like very adamant that there was rules that abide by how you actually talk to people. I think that was the first time that I had even had anybody confront me saying that the nomenclature I used to describe them was incorrect. And then, as I went through and you started learning about the Sunnis and the Shias and learning about like how they wipe their ass with their left hand with water instead of toilet paper, like I was very inquisitive and I wanted to learn about how rugs were made and certain things. But
Okay.
I was never going to assimilate to it. I was just, you may
I,
as well learn while you're there.
can I point out, I don't think you really wanted to learn how rugs were made either. You wanted to learn how much you could make for them over here in the United States if you bought them over there.
That's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I bring up Dave for a reason, though, because I feel like Dave was kind of your, man, I don't know how to say this. He was kind of your grounding stone there. Like, if you didn't understand something, he explained it to you. He took the time to do it, and he made you, man, I'm going to hate saying this, but almost made you want to be a better man when you looked at him and saw all the languages that he could speak and how he took part in learning the culture and learning actually how the rugs were made and why it was important and what needed to be important on there. Can we talk about Dave a little bit? Because he was a very interesting character to me in the book.
Yeah, so Dave, he was like a Korean. His parents were immigrants. He was a Korean guy, grew up kind of poor, and his parents stressed education. My parents did not. My parents stressed being able to hammer a nail. So um, he ended up going to Tufts University, getting his undergraduate degree, and then joining the Marine Corps as an infantry guy. And then they realized that he was going to Tufts, and they said, "No, we're going to make you an intel guy." So by the time he got to Blackwater, he already had his bachelor's degree from a very prestigious college. He had infantry training, he had intelligence training, and he was cultured. Like he was the person that wanted to learn how other cultures worked. I was kind of the opposite, but I was very inquisitive. So Dave would always be the guy when I would say, "Hey, what the hell's going on with this or what's going on with that?" He would have he would be able to explain it to me without just like talking down or being condescending, right? He'd be able to say, "Look, this is the reason why the Sunnis and the Shias don't like each other. So when you're seeing the cleansing or the kill squads in Baghdad on Haifa Street, those are the Shias, and they're moving all the Sunnis out of this street because Saddam Hussein was a Sunni and they want retribution." Like he'd be able to explain it to me where I'd go, "Oh, now that actually makes sense. Give historical context, give like an educated view of the world that most Blackwater guys either didn't care to have, or were like me and they were just like, cool, let's go out there and shoot something."
Okay. So I bring him up because I want to bring another person up. I want to talk about Andrew real quick. And the reason I'm bringing these guys up is I want to show just how different you were at different points of the book. So Andrew is, from what I understand, a guy that you went to after a while of knowing him and seeing how he worked and just kind of really respecting the kind of person that he was. And you had kind of a racial epiphany with him, and you went in to talk to him about stereotypes. And it not only was good for you to do that, but you find out later on in life that it was good for him too.
Yeah, so Andrew is my token black friend at Blackwater. Great guy. I mean, absolutely one of the sharpest guys I've ever met. Still talk to him to this day. He he grew up kind of like me, kind of poor guy. Joined the Marine Corps, got through sniper school, ended up going and working for Blackwater, and was really like he was just the opposite of me. He was the guy that decided he was going to take college classes, while I was the guy that was like, I'm going to read the Harry Potter books. He was the guy that was like, I'm going to learn how to speak Arabic. I want to go to Harvard. Like he had goals and he had plans, and he was extremely like astute. I mean, he could make a fart joke as good as anybody, but at the end of the day, you could tell that he was going somewhere in life. You know, I grew up small town USA. My grandparents were like, my grandfather was a Dust Bowl Okie. Like you hear racial stereotypes all the time in small town USA. And he broke every single one of those. And it was spectacular for me because I was like, oh, there's 1,000 jokes. And he would come in and be like, hey, Morgan, you got to tell me a black joke. And I'd be like, but you have to tell me a white joke. How come you never tell me any white jokes? And he's like, oh, they're not really that funny. And I'm like, all right. So, but dude, just an absolute guy. Like when you think of somebody that will break every single stereotype, that was Andrew, and it still is to this day. Like when I talk to him, like he's just one of those dudes. You could take the color of his skin away, and he's just like the coolest dude ever. But I wasn't ready for that, man.
Here's why I bring those two up. Both of something that you really had never seen, never taken a part of, and both cultures is what I'm talking about. And you see that and you start to learn. My question would be, though, is remember in the very beginning when we talked about it and you said you just kind of become the people that you're around. I don't think when you were around these guys yet, though, that you became those people. It seemed to me when I was reading the book that it was always kind of a far off thing to you. Like, yeah, it would be nice to be like those guys, but I really don't want to work to be like those guys at that time in your life. Would you agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Like, I want to be the guy that can go through the historical context of the Middle East and how Iraq was created after World War One. But at the same time, I got some video games I need to play. So what's going to win? And most of the time, the video games did win out. But I mean, both of those guys, I still talk to both of them to this day. And if I need advice, those are the types of dudes I go and I talk to because I need a different perspective. And that's what those guys gave me over at Blackwater.
Of those two guys, do you think that there was anyone else around you that started to change who you were? And what I mean by that is you become a very hateful, angry person while you're there. And you are very candid about it in the book that you start as a tadpole, you move to being a frog, and then a poison dart frog. I want you to explain, maybe not necessarily who it was, because I don't want to put anyone out on Front Street, but why that one over? When you had these guys that were there, that were learning the culture, wanted to learn the language and all that kind of stuff, why did it go the opposite direction for you?
Well, you have to put it into context. Like when you go over to Blackwater, you can be on a team with one person for 3 to 4 weeks,
Of
and then that
course.
person moves to another team. When we left Sulaymaniyah, Andrew stayed up in Sulaymaniyah, and then I went back down to Baghdad. Eh, I think what happened was like getting on the QRF was going to be the coolest thing ever. And I had buddies that were on the QRF, the Quick Response Force. And once I got on there, like those were the guys that had the mentality of me, like live for the day, let's do this, let's go have fun, let's go have our adventure. And that ultimately is kind of what won out while I was in Baghdad. As I progressed and I get up to Kirkuk and I become like a team leader and stuff, I changed up there also to a certain extent, right? Because then it became like, oh, now I'm in charge of people. I have to actually do things do things the right way, right? A leadership role is going to be completely different than the guy that's just a window licker, which is what I was for the vast majority of the time. Now, the reason why I became an asshole is because it's a natural progression. And I saw it in the military, I saw it at Blackwater. The first 3 months, you want to go over there and you want to do everything right. You want to help the people of Iraq. You want to be the change that you want to see in the world. After 3 months, it starts getting jaded. People start getting jaded, right? Somebody died, something happened where you're frustrated. And you say, do these people care about their country as much as I do? I'm putting my life on the line for these people that don't care about their country, is how it feels. And then at some point, you say, fuck them. If they don't care, then why am I going to care? And I got to the point where it was like, dude, I'm just not going to care at all. Like, who gives a shit? I'm going to come here, I'm going to make my money, and I'm going to leave. And this place is still going to be a dump when I leave. It's a dump now. I can't actually affect change, so I may as well just do whatever I want while I'm here.
I'm glad you said it like that, because here's where this was some of my favorite parts of the book. I want to talk about the BMW wreck that you guys jumped out and were kind of a quick reaction force on. I think you know what I'm talking about, correct?
Yeah. So,
Well, hold on. I want to set this up.
set the stage for me.
In the chapters before, you hate everybody. You hate everything. And then you see this happen, and how you just said just now, you get to a point where you're like, fuck them. I don't care. I'm going to make my money. But then this person comes out of you, and it's this whole different story in the middle of the book. And I've got to understand how that switch gets thrown back and forth, because like I said, a paragraph before, you're like, fuck them. Who cares? I don't care. And then you're like, okay, this has got to turn out well. This has got to do this. Let's talk about it. You kind of set up the story, and then what it was that was so different that made you act this way, because there were points along the book where you did this. And I don't know if you meant to write that in there like that, or if you meant to put that much emotion into it, but you seem like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in two different sections.
Yeah, you remember that movie Crash that won like some Oscars back in like the early 2000s, where the cop is an asshole, but then he goes and he saves somebody's life. So like there is good and there is bad in everybody. is kind of what the movie was about. And I think that that's kind of appropriate here because we were driving south from Sulaymaniyah down to Kirkuk, and this BMW was driving north, and it's a brand new road. It's like the nicest road I'd seen in Iraq. And this BMW is going like 110 miles an hour, and it starts swerving, and like the back end starts fishtailing. And as soon as that happens, everything goes into slow motion because you know something's about to happen. Your body starts reacting, and your brain starts reacting faster than reality, which is the hardest thing to explain if you've never experienced it. So it fishtails, it swerves back the other way, it goes into the median in between the two, and it just starts rolling. I swear to God, like it was slow motion rolling. It was a movie. It felt like I was watching the Avengers and you see a car and it's like slowly going end over end. And these things just start flying out of it. It looks like, rag dolls start flying out of it. And it rolls in front of the car. I'm driving a Toyota Land Cruiser, I remember because I was too big for it. And it rolls down this embankment. And I thought, holy shit, I can't believe that actually happened. Well, once I popped out of the car, looked down, one of those little things that was flying out of the vehicle was a kid. And he's got these light blue eyes, and he's Kurdish, and he's got brain fluid coming out of his nose, and like everything that every way you think you're going to react when something like that happens gets thrown out of the window, right? Like you're supposed to go and you're supposed to react and do stuff, but at the same time, you just want to sit there and stare at it. Like it's just this total shock. So this kid's got brain fluid going out of him. There's another kid that's sitting on the other side of the median, literally like sitting on her butt. And then everybody just gets out and starts doing their job. So I think I must have stared at that kid for like 8-10 minutes. It was probably 4 seconds max. That's the only time I spent. And then I started working security. They grabbed one of the guys out of the vehicle, the driver, and his head is caved in and his brains are hanging out and it looks like worms are crawling. It's the craziest thing. And my first thought is, fuck all those politicians that said video games desensitize our kids. When you see something like that in real life, it is so completely different than any video game I played growing up. It was different than Super Mario Brothers, I'll tell you that. So, we end up rendering aid. By now there's like 3 or 4 people that are walking up from where the car wrecked. There's this guy who's got blood all over him. My buddy Andrew is putting a little bandage on his head. They're screaming, they're crazy, we're stopping traffic, and it's just like absolute mayhem. And it's hard to describe, but it's just so different when it's a kid, right? Like hopefully that kid was going to have this amazing, spectacular life as an Iraqi living in Kurdistan, but you're watching essentially like the life drain out of this kid. And it's so hard to look at a kid that has all that potential and could be something amazing and know that the chance of them living is so hard. And that's what I wrestled with. I would say for a long time, I wrestled with that. Like, how do you, and war sucks as it is, but when you start throwing kids into the mix, man, like I don't even know how to explain it, but like if somebody came up and kicked a puppy, you'd be like, you're an asshole. But if somebody kicked the dog, you'd be like, yeah, you're a dick, but you're not as bad as the guy that kicked the puppy. That's how it feels.
Okay. I see that and what you're saying. After you transport these kids to the hospital, they say that the boy's probably not going to live. The girl will miraculously I think she was unscathed actually from the.
Pretty much, yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. But the boy, I mean, your medic is saying I give him like a 5% chance, and you were saying no, he's fine. Everything's okay. We're good. And you said that he becomes a doctor later on in life. That's how you make it. But then in the next sentence, you say you see him in your dreams over and over and over.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's just different with kids, and I wasn't a parent, so I can't imagine what it felt like when some of the other guys had young kids that were on the team. One of our medics actually had younger kids that was on the team, so I don't know how they dealt with it, and I don't know that when the medic got over there, he started working on the kid, and I got the nice 2 to 3 seconds of just staring at him and being like, "Holy crap! Like, what the hell's going on?" So I hope. I mean, the guy would probably be in his 30s now, so I hope he's absolutely like living his best life, and he made it. Really, what it came down to is I don't want to be confronted with the reality that a child died, or even that the driver died at that point. So don't sit here and tell me like, oh, he's probably not going to make it. Like, just lie to me. That's where I'm at right now. Just fucking lie to me. At least I'll be able to sleep better at night.
This episode brought to you by Max Belts. Guys, are you looking for a perfect accessory to wear every single day for every single scenario? Well, you've come to the right place. We all know that nothing stands up to wear and tear like a good leather belt. If you're looking for the toughest leather belt on earth, then you've come to the right place. Max Belts. They're handcrafted in the USA by veterans who are serious about their craft. And if you're looking for a belt that's tough enough for your active lifestyle and help support those who've given so much to our country, look no further than Max Belts. It's the toughest belt on the planet. It's a perfect solution for casual or dress wear and ideal for utility and firearm carry. It's the highest caliber of American craftsmanship, and it also positively impacts our military charity partners. Once again, Max Belts, you can't go wrong with them. I wear them every day. They're the toughest belt on earth. And you can find all of this and so much more at maxbelts.com. I'm glad you brought up the driver, because here's how I think about that. And this was all kind of driving to this question. You talk about hating the people, not caring what happens to them. You talk about the driving, that there's reasons why they weren't good drivers. Sometimes they were just asshole bad drivers. Does something, when you see those kids get hurt, that guy get hurt, I'm not sure if he died, does it make...
He was done.
But does it make you hate even more when you see that and you see what happened because of his doing? Does that make the hate grow even stronger in you? And I'm asking because I'm wondering where all of it came from. There has to be all these different points where it happened. Is this one of those times where it just kind of adds one of those bricks into the wall?
No, I hate that guy with all my heart, like to this day, because you don't drive like that, cause an accident, and cause people to get killed. So yes, that driver absolutely hated his guts, but I didn't project that on the rest of the population. And the reason is the Kurds in northern Iraq are not the same people as the Sunnis and the Shias that are in southern Iraq, right? The Kurds have their own army, they have their own government, they're self-sustaining, they are just genuinely like a pretty well-functioning society in a place where I didn't expect to have that.
And you mentioned that in the book a couple different times about the Kurds.
Yeah, and like that's why I hated that driver and not sit there and say, now I hate the Kurds. Um, and we'll probably get into it later, but when we had the 7 contractors die in April, like that's where it just turned south. Like at that point, it was like, now I've lost people that I cared about, that I liked, that I knew, for something that is never going to pay off any dividends, and fuck everybody.
Before we get to that, because that was coming up quickly, I want to talk about the animals that you took care of. And the reason I want to point these out, not just because there's a couple funny stories with the animals and how you came to be in charge of them, but at one point in the book, you say that you would save all of them over other people, that you want to bring them back to the United States. And I understand where you feel that way, but there were points where you saw Blackwater contractors treating the animals worse than some people. So can we talk about that, and where that culture is not supposed to do that, but you see it kind of all around you? And then let's talk about how you feel about these animals, because you bring them up probably 100 times in the book.
Man, well, it goes back to the innocent thing, right? Like the kid. Animals are innocent, right? They're just out there trying to survive. And I've always had like a soft spot for animals. So the first animal we rescued was just this mangy, crazy dog up in Sulaymaniyah that would crap all over the place. But was probably the smartest dog on the planet, right? Because its instincts are, how do I survive? So when we got him up to the hotel, he was like, here's how I survive. I go and I steal all the chicken off your plate and I run down the hallway and then I take a crap because somebody else has to pick it up. It was almost like finding humanity in an inhumane place, right? It doesn't matter how bad things were. You got to pet the dog, which was spectacular. Then, there's always the goat thing. And I make a joke about it. Like we go to the veterinary, to a veterinarian, and we're getting shots for that dog that we have. And he's sewing up a goat's asshole. And I got pictures of it if anybody needs it. It's so the joke is like, yeah, somebody was fucking that goat. And it's only funny because it happens quite a bit over there in the Middle East. Like they are into their bestiality stuff. But animals are just so freaking innocent, dude. Like I put my money where my mouth was. When I went back in 2009, I rescued a dog from Iraq. I sure as hell wasn't, giving anybody a visa to come and hang out at in my house when they were Iraqis, and there was a lot of them trying to leave. But to be able to give an animal like a better life felt like it was a good investment. Whether that was when I was with Blackwater feeding tuna fish to Mr. Mittens, who was the cat that I rescued, sort of, when I got back to Baghdad.
You not even close rescued that cat.
Come on, that cat.
No, not even close.
Love that cat. That cat used me like I was a piece of meat, like I was a hooker. But like I genuinely feel bad for them, right? Because I think animals, kind of like children, are usually going to give you the benefit of the doubt, and and in a place where you're not getting a whole lot of benefit of the doubt, where it's like, hey, they're shooting rockets at us every morning and it's blowing up, and I'm just waiting for one to hit me. It's just nice to have that, like, that innocence of the cat. But the cat, this goddamn cat, man.
Let's talk about Mr. Mittens.
Mr. Mittens lived underneath my little living quarters in Baghdad behind the pool. And I was bummed out. And Mr. Mittens came out from underneath my living quarters and he let me pet him. And I was like, dude, I got to go get this guy some tuna fish. So I had some tuna fish in my room. I'm feeding him. He's just loving it. And every night I would just go and pet this cat and I'd feed him tuna fish, give him water. And then he just ghosted me, like straight up, it just out of nowhere, gone. So I went to the pool and I'm bummed out. Like, I'm actually bummed out that I don't have my kitten that I get to pet, and he's getting all fat and healthy. And I walk over to this little tree area and Mr. Mittens is under there. And I'm like, oh, hey, big guy, what's going on? And he's like, I was like, dude, you don't have to be a dick. Like, did you find ahi tuna somewhere else? Come on, man. Well, Mr. Mittens was pregnant and had her entire litter of kittens underneath that bush, and she was protecting them. So I went and got some tuna fish and some water, and that was the last time I saw her, which sucks because they had private military contractors go over there, and their whole job was eradicating animals from bases. So I know exactly what happened to Mr. Mittens and hit all of her kittens, but I don't really want to think about that because, I mean, we were cool. We were good. We were buds, sort of.
Let me ask you something. So there's all these times where you talk about, you don't want to think about the things that happen in that BMW crash. You don't want to think about what happened to Mr. Mittens. You don't want to think about what happened to the dogs on that outpost where there were like 30 dogs on the outpost. But it doesn't bother you to think about all the other horrors that you saw around you.
I'm an enigma. It's disturbing. Look, there was a study that had people watching movies, and like when a person got shot, they would check their heart rate and all this stuff. And then if an animal got shot, they would check their heart rate. And it was worse for the animals. Everybody felt worse for the animals than they did for the humans because there's an innocence for those. So yeah, for me, it really is just distancing yourself from the shit that you don't like and being able to try to concentrate on the good stuff that actually happened.
All right, well, let's kind of change gears and go into something not great. I want to talk about April 2005. 7 Blackwater contractors are killed. You say this is the point where it pushed you over the edge, where you were completely done with what was going on. The question that I have for you to begin with is, yes, you're on a contract, right? I don't know how far you are out from getting out of your contract when you're doing this. But you're not military. You can step away at pretty much any point. You're not going to get your bonuses. You're not going to get some other stuff. If it becomes that bad, why don't you just step away?
Man, that's a good question. I guess because I never even thought about it. I didn't think about it till you just brought it up. Yeah, so 7 Blackwater contractors died. 6 of them got shot down in a helicopter April 7th, 2005, and another one got killed outside of Ramadi with an EFP. And like that's when war went from being abstract to personal, right? So you can go and you can deploy to Iraq. The Air Force does it all the time, where they stay on the same base and they hang out and they get fed every day. They get to go to the gym. War for them is very abstract because they're in it, but they're not in it on a daily basis. At some point, it becomes personal. And for me, it became personal when I knew 2 of the guys on the helicopter that died. Like that became personal. And I could have at that point said, it's not worth it. But I mean, hell, I could have left. You're right. But the thought didn't even cross my mind. The only thought that crossed my mind was like, how do you get retribution for something along these lines when this horrible shit happens to people that you know, the people that you like? I mean, I wouldn't say I loved them, but they were good dudes. Like they didn't deserve to go out like that.
But here's where I'm confused, because we talked about the kind of operations that you're doing where you're transporting from here to there, not really doing direct action and things like that. How are you going to get retribution? There's really not a way. I mean, unless you run into these guys on a convoy or something. So that's what I'm trying to figure out with you because you talk about in the book, retribution, revenge, whatever you want to call it, but it's not even a real possible thing.
No, it's not. And to be honest with you, there's nothing that would have brought them back. There's nothing I could have done to bring them back. Even if the guy that was on the video shooting the heat-seeking missile at the helicopter and watching it go down, even if they brought him on the Blackwater compound and we all got to punch him in the face, it still wouldn't have changed anything. I think it's just it's almost a natural inclination that when you feel slighted, to want to be able to exact some kind of revenge. And I don't know that, I mean, it never actually works. Like nobody says, oh, that person cut me off, so I went and, shot his back tire out and I feel really good about it. Like it doesn't work, but it's a natural human instinct. The same way it's a natural human instinct to not want to kill somebody, right? People talk about Blackwater and how we were out there running and gunning. Nobody I knew was out there like actively shooting at somebody that was driving the car. They were shooting at tires. They were shooting at the engine block. Like there's still a morality to it and a personalization to it that is so hard to explain when you're not a soldier.
So let me ask you then, when we're talking about this and we're talking about there being a morality to it and revenge coming into it, let's say you get revenge. Say you get retribution. Knowing yourself now and knowing yourself then, I want 2 different answers. Do you feel better about the situation? Do you feel like it made any difference? Do you feel like I don't want to say checked a block, but definitely kind of cleared up everything that you felt about that time?
No, and still no. To be completely honest with you, I think that's the frustration with a lot of private military contractors and a lot of soldiers is that there is no closure when it comes to Iraq and losing friends over there. It's not like you can take a plane to Babylon and go check out the Tower of Babel right now, and they're going to welcome you with open arms. So it wouldn't have mattered if I got retribution and I could check that block. It probably would have made things worse for me going forward.
Let's also talk about when you talk about the difference between contractors and military. There's a point where you bring these guys to the airport to send them back home. One has blood on his face and hasn't really been cleaned up for the transport. One of your guys goes off. I won't say a fight, but there's a pretty big stir up at the airport. Can you talk about how you feel about that? You're 24 years old. You're kind of drunk with all of this intoxicating that people are laying on you. And then you see when it's over, because now you're seeing a completely different perspective. When it's all over, people don't really, they're just doing their job and getting you back to the United States and stuff like that. And like you said, there's no one to call in. There's no fanfare. There's no anything. How does that affect you as a 24-year-old seeing that? And I don't want to say that it doesn't make everything not worth it, but how does it make you feel when you see that there's not really anything on the backside of it?
Yeah, no, you don't get a parade when you come home. You don't get, you don't get buried at Arlington National Cemetery when you die as a contractor for the most part. You don't get treated the same as the military. So the story was a guy got shot through the throat, and he was a Blackwater guy in Ramadi, and the military people didn't clean him up before they sent him home. So he had blood coming out of his ears, his eyes, his nose. And when my buddy asked, like, why didn't you clean him up? They said, we clean up soldiers. We don't clean up contractors. This is kind of what, in a microcosm, this is exactly how the military and contractors feel about each other, right? There's no coordination. We don't like each other. Nobody's going to go out of their way to help you as a contractor for the most part if something bad happens. Like, the military saw us as a nuisance because we did whatever we wanted whenever we wanted to. I talk about the guys that jumped on Route Irish to go watch a Kid Rock concert. Nobody had to say, hey, I'm going to go on a convoy to go watch Kid Rock.
Or jumped on Route Irish to get a Harry Potter book.
Yeah, but Harry Potter is pretty important. Let's be honest.
But we'll get into that in a minute. But I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so I mean, even when I went back in 09 and 10, these contractors came through my gate at JSS Justice, and I was like, why didn't they tell us they were coming? I didn't know they were in the AO. If something would have happened, we couldn't have scrambled anybody to help them anyway. And then I remembered, oh, I was a contractor. Yeah, we didn't want to be bothered with that crap. So the military saw us as a nuisance. We saw the military as inefficient and not actually getting any kind of a job done. And at the end of the day, I think that bore itself out in how Iraq turned out ultimately, right? Like, the CIA wanted to do stuff outside of the State Department, outside of the DOD. Like, nobody coordinated with anybody. Everybody was just trying to say they did their job and take the, like, when the good things happened, to take the credit. And when the bad things happened, say, oh, that was somebody else that did that. That was either contractors, or that was, this agency, or that was this unit. Like, even when you have like military units, the 101st versus the 82nd, they would blame each other for what went bad also.
The thing that I want to ask you about that, though, when you said that, oh, yeah, I remember when I was a contractor, we didn't want to be bothered. So there becomes kind of a sticking point there on the question of, you don't want to be bothered, but you do want to be bothered. Is it a hard situation to read? It's like, you're giving mixed signals to people. We don't want to be bothered until we do want to be bothered. Would you agree with that, playing devil's advocate?
Yeah, we are teenage girls. Let's be honest here. We love you and then we hate you. But really, I would love to have a lot of junior military officers read this book just to see that private contractors, they are humans. But at the end of the day, it wouldn't have been that difficult for us to coordinate stuff with the military. Now, we didn't want to, because the military would have bogged it down. And I talk about when we're sitting there waiting for a military convoy for hours and hours and hours, and how miserable it is. And then we don't tell them that we left the convoy, so they can't even account for us because we didn't care. But at the same time, that's not a good way to win wars. So right, you can play devil's advocate, but you're right.
But if I could play devil's advocate again to that, when you say that we sat in that line waiting forever for the convoy to happen, you had a guy in your group as a contractor that told you, why are you leaving without me saying go? And so you guys had an argument and an AAR after it's over. And then the next fucking time you leave the gate, you don't leave when it's leave time. And he says, why aren't you moving? And you said, because I'm waiting on your command. Well, I don't have to tell you that. So you had the same shit in the contracting world.
Yeah, but we fired that guy shortly after, because that's not how contractors roll. And the reason why I didn't go until he told me to was just to be an asshole. Like, to him. I didn't
thought
like
it was right. I thought it was nothing different than that. as you see yourself over there, the Blackwater contractors have been killed. This kind of growing in you, and you talk about it that you can see it. At one point, you talk about calling grandma and grandpa, and the best part is when your grandpa talks to you at the end, and you call your aunt Shirley and all this, and then you reach a point in the book where you're like, "Fuck them, I don't care."
Yeah, no, I mean, I did the best I possibly could to alienate myself from my family. Like at the time, I don't know I was doing it consciously, but I also didn't want to spend the time hearing about their day, you know, when I don't know, it's like it's ego, it's self-importance, right? It's like, well, I just had a rocket that landed within like 50 meters of me, and you guys are worried about, well, they're trying to teach little Billy how to swim, but he's not taking to it very good. So, like, the conversation you talk about earlier with my grandma, my grandfather was earlier on. And then by the time it got to the point that I'd stopped caring, like, I stopped caring completely. And that sucks.
But I guess I'm trying to understand how that happens. I understand you hate the situation that you're in. You hate what's going on around you, all of that. I get that. But when you talk so fondly about grandma and grandpa, and then you reach a point with them where you're like, fuck it, I don't even care if I talk to them. I've got to understand how that happens. You said you did a
Man,
great job of alienating yourself, but I think it's more than that.
no, I know, I get it. I wish there was good explanations for it, but on the one hand, when you call home, you don't want to have to explain to people how crazy it is, right? Because you don't want them worrying about you. The last thing you need is somebody that's worrying about you, and every time you call them, you say, "Hey, um, like, how is everything? Did anybody get hurt?" Like you don't want to answer those questions to your family at home, so you don't tell them. And then on the opposite side, you also don't want to hear about how little Billy can't swim. So
And
it's
that's
just,
what I was going to ask you was,
yeah.
that's where the weird part is to me, is that you say, I don't care what's happening with little Billy and stuff, and I'm not going to explain to them about that. Well, what else is there to fill the time with but what's going on with them? If you're not saying anything that's going on with you, that's the only thing to fill the time with.
I know it doesn't make any sense that I wouldn't actually want to hear what they had to say, but I also didn't want to hear what they had to say, right? Like every day, it was like a rooster. They would wake us up by sending mortars and rockets into the green zone, and you would think, "Is today my day or not?" And you don't want people to think that you're in harm's way. You want them to think, "Oh my God, he's over in Iraq and he's just at the chow hall all day." But at the same time, there's this feeling like those little things that are bothering them are not big enough for my time or my energy. And I mean, the same thing happened when I was in the military. So I don't know that it's unique to contracting. What is unique to contracting is the prolonging that for, 6, 12, 18 months, 2 years, 5 years, however long that is. Because you can just keep going back. You could leave at any given time, but you can also go back at any given time.
Can we talk about your wife at the time? I don't even know how to kind of get into this relationship because it seems like it was there, like, you had a relationship, and then when you met up and you saw how money was being spent and all these kind of things that you never talked about over there, it was like an instant you were like, yeah, I'm good, I don't really care. Is that it? Was I reading that right?
No, I think you pretty much read it. So
Okay.
here's my disclaimer. Don't do steroids. They make you an emotional young man. So the relationship that I had with her was very on and off. And then this is what happens. And whether you're a soldier or not, like soldiers go to basic training, and then right after basic training, they go and they get married to their high school sweetheart. I can't tell you how many soldiers I had that would get married as soon as they got to their first duty station, and it didn't last more than like 2 to 3 years because you're holding on to something back home. You're hoping that that is tying you to something back home. And I did the exact same thing, but I knew it was coming. I knew there was a folly to it. I still did it to the point that I was like, let's get married. And then once we got married, I was like, she still completely, like, it didn't feel like we were married. I lived my life, she lived her life. I made my money, she spent my money. And then like just seeing her, it's like like, there's not like butterflies. Like I see my wife right now and I'm like, oh my God, like she could roll around in mud and I'll look at her and be like, oh my God, she's the most amazing woman on the planet. But like when I got married to my first wife, it was very it was an attachment that I think I wanted to retain for something back home. And then when I actually had that attachment, I was like, oh, this is not working out as well as I thought it was going to.
Do you think you were worried about, I don't know, dying and not having left a legacy or not having, do you think that was part of it at all?
No, no, the thought of dying never even really crossed my mind, right? Like you see it, you see other people die, you don't think it's going to happen to you. If you got a bunch of 24-year-olds in a car and there's five of them and you said, hey, three of you guys are going to die in a car accident, all five of them would look around and say, man, it sucks for those other three. That was me. I mean, it was just me. Like, I didn't think I was going to die. And if it happened, it happened. There's nothing I could do about it. So it definitely wasn't a legacy thing. I do think it was a one of those, like, when I get done with Blackwater and I grow up, like that marriage and the wife and the kids and the house and all that other stuff. I think I was trying to cobble that together, not realizing that you can't just do that. Like, hey, we bought a house. Oh, I'm married. Hey, we got a dog. Hey, look at over there. We got
Yeah.
a Land Rover. Like you throw those all together. If it's not a natural progression, it doesn't usually work.
All right, let me ask you another question. I want you to be as honest as you can. When all of this hate is going through you and you're just kind of an angry person all the time, you think you start hating yourself a little bit?
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Yeah. No, I was an asshole. Like, I'll be the first one to tell you that I was an absolute prick. And it doesn't matter with Blackwater, it's such a competitive environment. You have all these guys that are hyper competitive, that were the best trained people on the planet that the planet can produce. And I'm trying to hang with these guys, and I'm never going to be good enough. Like, it wouldn't have mattered if I bench pressed more than that Navy SEAL or I squatted more than that recon Marine. It was never going to be good enough. And that's something that I think I still struggle with today. Like, I don't like to sit still. I always want to be doing something. Like, I have a job. I'm married. I've got two kids. You know what I should do? Write a book. Like, there's always something that I could do better. And I think I'm finally getting to a point now where I can say, no, that's actually just pretty cool. Like, I can just leave that there to a certain extent.
So you would say you're content with your life now?
I'm pretty content with my life now. I
Okay,
will I will
wait a
say
minute.
that.
Are you content with your life or are you pretty content with your life? Because those are two very different things.
I'm pretty content. There's always something that I could do a little bit better, or a little bit, right now I feel like I'm fat as a pig and I should be like, I'll run half marathons, but I'm like, yeah, but I should still be running marathons, or I should still be running ultra marathons. Like, in my head, there's always going to be that want and the desire to do something better, or to do something else and see how good I can get at that. But at 43, it feels like I've accomplished more than my guidance counselor thought I was going to. So
We're,
that's a
we're talking about
plus.
in Cottonwood?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right. Talking about writing the book, I want to talk to you about liars and people that have no reason to lie, because
No,
this is
fuck.
a okay. This is a topic that is brought up over and over and over in the book. Let's talk about liars first, and then I want to talk about ones that I think you think to a degree is even worse, people that have no reason to lie that lie. So let's start with liars.
So Blackwater was a lot like prison, right? The first person that comes up to you in prison or at Blackwater wants to be your friend because they don't have any friends. Nobody likes them. They're turds. So you don't want to be friends with them. But what I did realize at Blackwater is a lot of these guys were, I wouldn't say a lot, but there's a small minority of them that wanted to be able to say that they were cooler than they were before they got to Blackwater, right? So you have the guy that was an infantry guy, and he was telling everybody he was special forces, and then later some special forces guys came in and they said, yeah, we never worked with this guy in this group. Oh, well, I supported special forces. Or I was in Somalia. Yeah, you were in Somalia, but you weren't in Black Hawk Down. Like there's a lot of people that just want to prove themselves by showing what they've done in the past instead of just going out there every day and trying to operate. So that drives me absolutely up the wall because I'm an Air Force Security Forces guy, and I wear that as I wouldn't say a badge of honor, but like that's where I got started. Right at the end of the day, that's where I got started. So why would you come up and lie about stuff? But like I said, Blackwater is really competitive, so people just started kind of taking their half truths and turning them into their full truths, and you're like, but why? Why do you want to lie about this stuff?
Let me pose a question to you. You say at the end of your book, these are the stories as I remember them. You say that. These are the stories as I remember them. Do you think a lot of these guys, that's just the way they believe the story happened? That's just the way they remember it? Or are they liars?
Well, I would say they're liars.
Okay.
But you've been a cop. You know that you can go to an accident scene and you can talk to four different people and get four different stories, four different point of
100%.
views. Yeah. So what I have realized is a lot of people probably in the special operations and in the Blackwater community can take somebody else's story and they can insert themselves into it and say, this is how it happened, which is crazy to me because you worked for Blackwater. I feel like that's cool enough. You don't need to be the person that was like, yeah, and then I was out there running and gunning. I mean, some of the stories I hear about Blackwater guys and what they were doing, they didn't happen. Tactically, they could not have happened because that wasn't our mission and that's not what we would have done. It doesn't matter. Like nobody went in and cleared out a street in Baghdad so that we could have, door to door kicking in doors so that we could have a safe passage for the ambassador. It just didn't happen. And I'm making that story up. Nobody's actually said that I know of. So some of it is just people inserting themselves into a story or saying, oh man, like I could make this story sound cooler if I add this or add that. Those guys are liars. Now, maybe they remember it differently than me, but like there's still facts on the ground.
When we go into people that go so far as to put it pen to paper about it, people that continue to live lies. There's a person that you talk about in the book that didn't quite do what they said, and they had gone through a whole bunch of stuff, and everything was a little bigger than the other one. When they put pen to paper, how bad does that make it, or how much worse does that make it?
Oh my God, I feel like you're going to call me out on one of my stories.
Nope.
No, no.
I mean,
I'll be honest with you. I hope every Blackwater person writes a book or write articles or write something about it because this is a part of history that had never really happened before the way that it was conducted.
it's never happened since either.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, this is something that should not be lost to history. Now, the problem with it is a lot of the individuals that I've worked with cannot not accurately, but they can't articulate how things happened. And I've read this with after action reviews. I've read this with a number of different like individuals that send me stuff. And it's 7 pages and it jumps around so much that I have no idea what's actually happening. So if you're putting something on paper, if it's logical and people can figure out what the hell is actually happening, whether it's from your point of view or you're describing something else, like get it on paper. If you are going to sit there and say that you did this or you did that because you want to sell pins, I don't know what the Blackwater guys sell pins. I would not condone that. That's just not. I feel like you're taking it too far. But dude, you see it all the time. Who's the guy on YouTube that does like stolen valor? Former Navy SEAL.
Oh,
You
yeah.
see people that like will literally come up with the craziest shit, and it's why? I don't get it.
Well, and when you say, because this is where people, you get that real division with people. Some people say they're doing it because Blackwater's not going to take care of them after this is all over. The military's not going to take care of them after this is all over. So they write the books, they tell the stories, they do stuff like that to sell and to make a profit. I think though, with what you said about every Blackwater contractor should write a book, I don't agree with that, because that's where I think the history gets fucked up, because you have 1,000 different points of light coming into one, and who knows what is going to be the outcome of that? Who knows what's really true when you got 1,000 people telling either different stories or even the same story? You have a lot of trouble in the end with that.
That's fair. But at the same time, Eric Prince has a book where he talks about how Blackwater was, God's gift to humanity. Jeremy Skakehill has a book that says Blackwater is the worst thing that's ever happened to humanity. And I have a book with a bunch of poop jokes in it. So, I mean, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. If you're writing a book with an agenda, I'll be honest with you. If you're writing a book and you think you're going to make millions, you're not. I'll just you can read mine. I'll make 4 cents off of that if you buy it. So at the end of the day, if people can articulate it, I want them to write it. But I don't think there's people that are willing to put in the time and the effort to do it. So now you have to choose: is Eric Prince right, or is Jeremy Skakehill right, or is Morgan right? So there's got to be more than just us 3 or 4 that have actually done books.
But I'm glad that you bring that up, because let's talk about Eric Prince. You talk about a point in the book where he comes there and you're like, wow, this is the guy. And then shit happens and he's flanked by bodyguards and taken to a secure area. And you're like, what the fuck just happened? Like, I thought we were the ones protecting people. So when you bring him up, that makes me counteract that story right off the bat, that book right off the bat, because there's no doubt in my mind, after you seeing something on the ground in real life and hearing him write a book, I know that something's not matching up, because there's no way possible that he can be the greatest thing that ever happened to the war machine and then say what happened when you say it happened that way.
Yeah, so we ended up taking, look, I can't remember. I've talked to a number of people. Some people say it was a car bomb by the gate. Other people say it was a rocket hit close to where we were at. But we were in a hangar. We take this explosion happens, and Eric Prince's bodyguards like race around him and run him off to safety. And all the Blackwater guys, we've been hearing this every day, day in and day out. Like, we're just like almost immune to it. We all just kind of hang out there. And then he's gone. Here's what I would say about Eric Prince. He was the CEO of the company, and the way that he remembers things happening are not from a ground perspective. He talks about how many times we fired our weapons. He talks about never losing a principal. He talks about all these things that Blackwater did, but Eric Prince was never on a convoy with me. Eric Prince was the CEO of a company. I don't expect the CEO of McDonald's to go flip burgers and be able to sit there and tell you the sights and the smells and the tastes and the sounds of sizzling a burger. And I don't expect Eric Prince to be able to tell you how Blackwater did stuff. So at the end of the day, he wrote from his perspective, but he also had an objective, right? Jeremy Skakehill's objective was demonize Blackwater. He didn't like him. Eric Prince's objective is make Blackwater sound like the greatest thing that's ever happened. And then you have, there's mine. There's another book called The Burner Detail by another Blackwater guy that just kind of tell it like it was on the ground. And that's really what I wanted to do with this book. Is I don't have an agenda. I just want you to sit there next to me in a Suburban and go through my mind of what's happening and when it's happening and how you react and what does it feel like in the moment, and then what does it feel like after that.
When you say, though, the CEO, that you don't want them to go down and flip burgers and stuff, but don't you think that's kind of an important thing to need to know how to do? You need to know how to do it.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not a hard job to flip a burger, and it's not a hard job to be a window licker in a Suburban. But the CEO of Blackwater is probably not going to put himself in harm's way because he still has to run the company. So the same way that the McDonald's CEO is not flipping burgers, he probably doesn't want grease burns on his nice fancy suit. I don't know, but at the end of the day, like, a CEO is not going to have the same viewpoint. A
Okay.
general does not have the same viewpoint as the PFC that's out there actually clearing doors. So when I read a book from a general, I just automatically assume it's bullshit because he wants to show that he was successful, even though Iraq and Afghanistan took a crap. I want the books from the guys on the ground. Like I want to hear your personal story.
Let's talk about your last night in Iraq before you go home, because I think this kind of all culminates everything. It culminates that ego. I think this one really shows the ego. I think that it shows that don't give a fuck mentality of what happens, because how it starts out is you're going to go home and you're like, I'm not going to drink. I'm going to, be ready to leave, and I'm ready to go start my life and buy this house and Land Rover and have the white picket fence and all that kind of stuff. And then almost instantly, it all goes to shit. And not only does it go to shit with you drinking, but then people are like testing you, like, I bet you can't do this and you can't do that. And you're like, well, fuck you, I'll show you. And then it ends horribly for you. So let's set up the last night before you leave, what your initial thoughts were, what your thoughts were while you were going through it, and then the thoughts afterwards.
Yeah, so first time I ever blacked out, which was kind of scary, but it was my last night up in Kirkuk, and then I was going to go down to Baghdad for a few days, and then I was going to go home, and I hadn't signed another contract, so I didn't have a time to come back. So my intent was to go home 2, 3, 4 months, and then assess, say, do I want to go back and work for Blackwater or somebody else? They're like, dude, Morgan, you got to come out. We got to like get drunk. And I was like, dude, I hadn't been drinking in a couple months. So I went and I had a couple of beers, and then somebody's like, just chug the rest of that vodka in the bottle. We could get booze wherever we wanted. So there was enough vodka in that bottle to where I blacked out drunk. Went into the U.S. Embassy bathroom, and allegedly, but I'm sure it happened, I beat the shit out of the U.S. Embassy bathroom, like like straight up. What's that? Die Hard, not Die Hard, Walk Hard, the movie where he like rips the sinks off and like punches out the windows and stuff. It probably looked as stupid as that. But yeah, I
I was
punched out.
thinking more Liar Liar, where he beats himself up in the bathroom.
That was probably closer to reality. And then, dude, apparently I went back and I kept drinking and finally got myself to bed. Almost slept through my alarm. Somebody knocked on my door to say, hey, it was great working with you, a State Department guy. So I grabbed my crap that I didn't even have all the way packed, got on a plane, went down to Baghdad. And that's when the story started coming, like getting emails like, why'd you beat up the bathroom? And I was like, why? What are you talking about? I have no idea. Like I felt so small after doing that. Like I couldn't control myself. I felt like the biggest piece of crap on the planet. But at the same time, it worked out well for me because Blackwater wasn't welcoming me back 2 or 3 weeks later with open arms. And I had to actually figure out what I was going to do with my real life. But I mean, all of it went into it, right? The ego of, I'm not going to drink. Oh, I'll have a couple of drinks. Oh, I guess I'll get blacked out drunk. Me sitting there talking shit to everybody that they weren't, they hadn't been on ground as long as I had, and they didn't have to cut their teeth in Baghdad where there was real danger. They got to come up to Kirkuk where it was relatively safe. Like I felt like the biggest asshole on the planet, and I probably was the biggest asshole on the planet for a number of those guys. But you just roll with it, man. I got home, kind of started my real life, and it's turned out pretty decent since then.
Going back to that night, do you think subconsciously that you were scared to become a civilian?
Oh, dude, I was scared to death. Um, and I know when I got home, I was expecting people to know what Blackwater was, which was unrealistic. To know that how dangerous it was for Blackwater, even comparing it to like day to day operations for military people. To treat me like I was a bad motherfucker, even though nobody knew who I was. And like this is where I have problems with the private military contracting model, is that all those scars of war that you get over time, the PTSD, the anxiety, all that stuff happens to contractors, and then when they get home, there's no support system. So this one didn't make it into the book, but I was going to the community college, and I didn't stop at the stop sign, and the security guard went out there and wrote me a $10 ticket. $10. I was making $550 a day like 2 weeks prior. I lost it on him. I got into his face. I threatened to kill him. I was so pissed off. And then finally, I went to class. The next day, the cops came to class and said, "Hey, Morgan, we need to talk." Like, I could have been arrested because I couldn't keep my temper in check, my ego in check when I got home. So, being scared to death to be a civilian, heck yeah, I was.
So as you do this and as you go to college, we don't even have to talk about Blue Eyes right now. We'll talk about the other people that you came across. Just people in your student groups and stuff where you were doing stuff where you just came across as an asshole and they didn't want anything to do with you. Why do you think you did that as a civilian? And then two, what do you think was it that started changing that and kind of doling down that sharp blade?
Yeah, so what I talk about in the book was the Virginia Tech shooting, where the guy ended up killing a bunch of students at Virginia Tech. And I'm in college, and the teacher comes in and it's like, "Does anybody want to talk about this?" And I'm in a sociology class or criminal justice, sociology of criminal justice, something like that. Worthless class. But anyway, nobody wants to say anything. So finally, I raise my hand and I'm like, "Fuck that guy. He's a pussy." Like, he didn't even have the balls to let somebody come in and kill him. Like, he ended up taking his own life. And the entire class was appalled that I would say this. Part of the reason why I said it was to kind of be in people's face about it. Like, the world is not as neat as being able to take sociological theories and layer them on top of something as horrible as a shooting at Virginia Tech. But the other part of it was like, I wanted these 22-year-old kids to see that there's a different view of this world because, you know, that was my goal in life, is to just ruffle people, to mess with them, to be an asshole to a certain extent. So I really I really did my best to bring perspective, I do air quotes, to these classes where these kids grew up in like these nice households, and they could sit there and pontificate about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, or school shootings. What finally doled it is getting divorced. I had to really look at myself in the face and be like, "Dude, like, you're a failure. You failed at this. And why did you fail at this? Because you're an asshole." Like, that's really what it comes down to. And it took a lot of self-reflection to be able to say, you don't have to be a dick. You don't have to be the person that goes and gets in other people's faces and lets them know that there's a whole nother world out there. Like, who cares?
It's just strange to me when you say that it was the marriage that did, because to the book, and tell me if I'm wrong, but to the book, it seems like that was the most, I don't want to say carefree. I don't think carefree relationship's the right thing, but the one that mattered maybe the least to you. Fair assumption?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fair, but it was also like the first time that I had failed at something so miserably, and having to realize, like, why did you fail at this?
Okay.
So it wasn't about the relationship as much as it was the introspection of saying, "Morgan, you really are an asshole. Like, you don't have to be an asshole. Like, I'm an asshole to everybody." But like, that was the one thing that pointed it out, like, where I couldn't deny that I was being an asshole, or give some kind of bullshit reason of why I was being an asshole. Like, I had to look myself in the face and be like, "Is this the person you want to be? Do you want to be an asshole for the rest of your life?" And the truth is, I didn't want to be an asshole for the rest of my life.
So do you think you failed with the Blackwater stuff too? I mean, I'm looking back on it where you say you felt like a big, asshole and everything there. Do you feel like you failed at that?
No, I don't think I failed at it. I think it was a phase, right? So when I joined the military in '99, you joined the military for 4 to 6 years, and then you got out and you lived your life. It wasn't like the military after 2001, where everybody went to retire. That wasn't how it went, right? It was literally like, you sign your first contract, and then the military will say, "Do we want to keep you or do we not want to keep you?" My entire intent was to go into the military as a phase, as a step, and then go to the next step. Blackwater was the next step, as it turned out, and then going back into the military was another step after that. So did I fail at it? No. Could I have done it better? I guarantee I could have done it better. I sure as hell could have saved my money better.
Well, I think what I mean by failure is not fail because you were very good at your job over there. What I mean is when you got to the end and Blackwater really wasn't asking you to do another contract or come back, did that make you feel like a failure at all?
I mean, it did to a certain extent, but I could have jumped on a Blackwater contract 3 to 4 weeks later if I really wanted to.
Right,
Right.
because they
Or,
told you that before you left. Hey, let things die
yeah.
down and you can jump back on.
Yeah. So I don't think I was a failure in that regard. I could have went with Triple Canopy. I could have got a contract with DynCorp. I could have went back. But getting fired the way that I did was at least a good enough slap in the chops that
Okay.
I said, like, I don't want this to be the rest of my life.
Okay. You're doing college, you meet your wife. From what I'm understanding, you're both in the military. Is that I'm trying to figure it out. So first off, I'm trying to figure out you go in as an officer who you hate at the top of your list of people.
Yeah.
And you become an officer and you go all the way up to captain because major, as you state probably 5,000 times in the book, is the most useless rank in the world. I got to understand why you do it. You go back in, not only in the military, but you go back in as an officer, the people that you can't stand.
So take all logic and throw it out the window here for a
Okay.
moment. So I got back in like December 2005, January 06, and the housing bust was getting ready to happen. And I didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life. I did have a sweet job at Sam's Club that was waiting for me that I could have went back to for like $12 an hour, but that's not exactly what I wanted to do. So I thought, well, I could join the Army ROTC and I can go fly helicopters. Like, that'd be a cool job. I may as well just keep chasing adventure. Like, I'm a single guy. Who cares? So I joined the Army ROTC, and then they said, if you want to fly helicopters, it's a 7.5 year contract. And I said, I don't want to fly helicopters that bad. That's too long. I'm not into commitment. So I ended up signing a 3 year active duty contract, going in as an intelligence officer. And in my head, I thought, as an officer, I can affect change. I know what those junior enlisted guys feel like. Like, it sucks. So I can go in there and I can affect change. And you go in there as a second lieutenant, nobody cares. First lieutenant, nobody cares. You make captain, nobody cares. Like, you can't affect change in the officer corps either. Like, I wish you could have. If I could have, I would have done it. But I ended up joining the military and getting hooked in with a whole different class of humans. These are the humans that like go to high school and then they know they're going to college and they have career plans and career paths. And that's ultimately what led me to going to graduate school at one of those snooty colleges. It led me to looking into different career paths instead of, falling back onto what was the easiest thing, which would have the easiest thing I could have done is just stayed in the military for another 10, 15 years and retired. So ultimately it worked out really, really well for me. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't plan it at the time, but it's getting in with a different class of people is going to change your perspective and ultimately change my future.
So can we say that throughout your life, your young life up until now, you've never really known quite what you were going to do past that next step? You were just kind of looking for adventure. Do you know now what you want to do? Do you know what your end goal is now? Maybe not necessarily completely refined, but do we have an end goal in mind?
No, no. I wish I could tell you that I did. I just want to be an awesome husband and an awesome dad right now. Right. Um, if I had stayed on the career path that I was on after I got out of graduate school, I would be the guy that's traveling 2 weeks out of the month, trying to run up the corporate ladder, to make as much money as I possibly can. And I realized once I had kids that being around your kids is kind of cool. My dad sort of missed out. I mean, it worked out for me, but like being around your kids is really freaking cool. And being with your wife and being able to sleep in the same bed and not travel all the time, like when you asked earlier, are you content? Yeah, I'm pretty damn content. That doesn't mean I don't want to make more money and I don't want to like go do other cool things, but I don't need to have my career to do those cool things, right? I can do
Got it.
those. I could go and run my dogs in the morning for 4 to 5 miles and feel pretty good. I don't need to run an ultramarathon again.
What do you think out of all the careers that you've had in your life, the most fun serving in, and what was the most rewarding?
The most fun was by far Blackwater, like hands down. Just the people you meet, the characters, just like absolutely the adventure that I had hoped it was, and more. The most fulfilling, the most rewarding. I don't know yet, man, to be honest with you, because I don't. My career is not what defines me. Like it's never going to be. It's a way for me to be able to make money. What defines me is my my kids. And dude, I put on a every year they have this thing at school, and I put on a banana outfit, and I'm the DJ, and I make dad jokes for like 4 straight hours. It's spectacular. Like it's not cool. I'm not sitting there walking around, with optics on my banana suit. But at the end of the day, like it's very fulfilling. So my
Okay.
career is just a way to be able to do that stuff.
I want to kind of compare two things kind of as the final thing. When you say, I don't know because my career is not really what's fulfilling to me, but I want to take a look at your contractor life and your college and army life, and then after kind of the book and everything. So with contractor, you have money, you have an ex wife, you have a lot of hatred, you have PTS. You're kind of trying to figure that out. And then you go to college and you figure out that you want to be a different kind of person, and you get to lead still, the way you want to, because you speak about that a lot in the book. You get a new wife, you get a new life, you get a new perspective on life. And so when you take those pros and cons of both of those, my final question to you is, how do you reconcile your past with your present?
I wouldn't have my present without my past, to be completely honest with you. Blackwater made me ultra competitive to the point that I wasn't finding happiness with anything that I actually did. But it also made me ultra competitive in that when I went to college to get my undergraduate degree, I graduated with straight A's. I had a 4.0 GPA coming out of there. When I got to my first unit, I was rated like the number one lieutenant in my battalion. Like it made me into the person to be able to go to graduate school at that snooty college, Tufts University, and be able to get a job in corporate America because I was above my peer group and I was able to get opportunities because I was so competitive. Now I just have to figure out how do I balance that competitiveness so that it doesn't take over, and make me an unhappy person. And dude, that's just a day to day thing.
All right, what's next?
Well, I got about 2/3 of a book done looking into like veteran suicide. This is what drives me crazy is that when people talk about veteran suicide, they're like, I did 22 push-ups today. Oh my God, look at it. It's so amazing. Um, but the excuse is always that they're veterans. Like it really is. It's an excuse. It's a platitude where people can say because they're a veteran, they committed suicide. There's so much more that goes into it. It's not combat deployments. It's defining it. It's not anything. And what I want to do is open up the conversation to say there's 18 to 22 years before somebody joins the military. Then you have your military time, and then you have your time after. What happened at the beginning, what happened during, and what happened at the end, where some people make it out. They make it out unscathed. My buddy Andrew, spectacular dude, doing absolutely great. My buddy Dave, the Asian guy, doing amazing. And yet you have a lot of Blackwater people and former soldiers that are killing themselves. So how are they different? And I don't think it's as easy as saying they were in combat or they were in the military. It has everything to do with how did they start their life? What does their what does their time in the military add to that? And then what happens afterwards? So I don't know. Maybe it's a pipe dream. Maybe I'll sell more than 3 copies, but we'll see.
I think that anything that you put your mind to, and what's so funny is how you say 3 copies. That's not true. Everything that you've done, you've really pressed it to the limit. And this is one more time where this is that dichotomy of you where now you've reached a point in your life where you're going back and trying to save other people, where you have for so long tried to prove yourself. Now you're trying to save other people. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I got friends that say that Morgan is the nicest asshole they've ever met. Like, I
I
will
can
give you the
agree.
shirt off of my back with no questions asked, but at the same time, I will make fun of you all the time. So, I mean, maybe that's just me. Who knows? But it, if you can affect change, if you can make somebody's day or life a little bit better, why the hell not? You know?
Let's talk about where people can find you. This is all social media, websites, anything like that, and where they can find the book.
Yeah, so go to my OnlyFans page where I play with pasta with my toes. I hear the Asians like it a lot, but no. So social media, I'm on X, I'm on Instagram, I'm on TikTok. It's just at Blackwater Dude 1, at Blackwater Dude and the number 1. And then if you want to grab the book that's on Amazon, got the audio, was recorded by Jay Moore, the comedian, absolutely spectacular dude. I owe that guy more than anybody knows. So go check it out. If you want like the ground perspective of how it feels to be in combat, this is it.
I not only have the audio version, but I also have the digital version, and I will agree with everything that you said there. It's spectacular in both forms and fashions. All right, guys, you know where you can find Morgan. Let's talk about where you can find me. As always, you can find me on Instagram at the DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast, and you can find me on YouTube, where all these conversations, they're in video form. But your one-stop shop, DTDpodcast.net. It's going to have audio, video. Morgan's going to have his own page on there with pictures. Hopefully he sends me more than he has right now, but we're going to build him a page and show a little more of his life, every place that you can connect to him, and where you can pick up that book right from DTDpodcast.net. I got to ask you guys, let's make sure that you are a friend and tell a friend. You share, like, subscribe. If you like what we're doing here, please help us. Subscribe to the show, make it grow so that we can bring more guests like Morgan on to here. Also, don't forget, you got to go to my sponsors, the guys that make the show happen. Trident Coffee. It's the best cold brew in the world. I cannot say enough good things about it. I drink one every day. They are absolutely fantastic. TridentCoffee.com. And if you put DTD15 in, you get 15% off your order. Also, stop by my buddy Max Belts at maxbelts.com. Pick you up a Max Belt. It's the toughest leather belt on earth. And our newest sponsor, Hatchet Brewery, at hatchetbrewing.com. Check out all of the hoodies, hats, mugs, anything that you can figure out. It's owned by a former Green Beret, and it's a brewery that's really taking over the world. So let's go and support them by buying their merch. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. Make sure you check out all my sponsors. Make sure you check out Morgan and everywhere, and pick up this book because it is amazing. I cannot say enough good things about it. Guys, that's going to be it for this week. That's Morgan. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys on the next one. See you later.